Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Soft Skills Are the New Hard Skills, and Here's Why. Before we begin, let's go over a few housekeeping items. If you're on the line and have not yet connected to the webinar, click the link in your confirmation email. Your browser may prompt you to download and run a file. When you're connected, you should see the presentation on your screen. If you have questions, you can send them via Zoom's Q&A function. Please take a moment and find the chat bubble icon near the bottom and center of the webinar screen. You can type and send questions throughout the presentation. We'll compile them and take time at the end for answers. When the questions have been answered, we will be giving away a gift card. Stick around because we'll be randomly selecting someone from the list of people still connected to the webinar. Also, mark your calendars. Other presenters originally scheduled to speak at the Provider Education Summit will be doing webinars in the near future. The next one will be RNs in Primary Care by Josie Moosman on May 19th at 12:30 p.m. You can register and see additional upcoming events at uhin.eventbrite.com. That's uhin.eventbrite.com. This webinar is being recorded and a copy will be made available to all attendees after the event. Now it's time to begin. Michael Page, the time is all yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's really kind of afternoon, and depending where you are in the country, I'll say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and I think we even had some attendees internationally, so thank you for joining us. I have to tell you about my haircut this morning. I was up getting ready and trying to make sure that things were in order, and as you might be able to see, I don't have much hair anyway, but if I don't keep it under control, I get little wispies here and there. And so this morning I just had my little buzzer up here and I was cutting my hair and everything was going well in front of the bathroom mirror. And I was feeling pretty good about it. I got the hair off my ears and got my sideburns trimmed. And all of a sudden, right when I was feeling comfortable, my wife walked in, watching me cut my hair, and I said, "Hey, I think this is looking pretty good." And she got close and she started to laugh, and she said, "Well, it looks really good except for this kind of wonky mohawk that you've got back in the very back that you kind of missed." And and we had a great laugh about that. She took control of the clippers and finished that up for me so that I'd be looking good from all the way around. But I love that story for a number of reasons. One, we get really comfortable doing what we're doing sometimes. And as she said to me this morning, she said, "You can't see what you can't see." And I thought, wow, in terms of even our business, our relationships and things, we really do need the people around us to make sure that we can see things that we can't see. And I think all of that drives this topic this morning for us, particularly as it has to do with hard skills and soft skills. You know what these hard skills are. Hard skills are things that we've had to learn. And usually hard skills come with some sort of either years of experience or certificates or degrees or things like that. We're not usually born with hard skills. There's something that we've acquired over time. And what's interesting, I mean, here are some of those hard skills. Anything like accounting or bookkeeping, certainly we're not born with those skills. And medical diagnostics, anything from lab skills, computer programming, technical marketing, all those things are the hard skills that we acquire. And again, usually when we're hiring for hard skills, we're looking for proof of that, either years of experience, certificates, diplomas, things like that will get us to those understanding someone's hard skills. Soft skills are something different. And to some degree, they are learned, but for the most part, they aren't learned. But they're refined as we get older, as we get more mature. Soft skills are usually responsible for a job fit, where hard skills are usually responsible for the qualifications for a job. But as we think about it, and part of our argument today is that these soft skills can actually make or break our success in a role, and particularly in healthcare, where soft skills, we're going to call them soft skills, but these soft skills are the very things that can make our healthcare encounters not only with our patients, but with one another, really critically important. Some of the soft skilled examples you can see here on the screen could range from trust to leadership. I mean, management to accountability, respect, kindness, compassion, integrity. Those are the kinds of soft skills. And yet, could you imagine hiring someone without any of those soft skills, that we hired only for diploma and for experience and skill rather than for looking at these more humanistic type skills? How we hire, research will tell us that we usually hire 90% for the hard skills. We hope for the soft skills, and we can somehow get a sense for the soft skills during an interview. We might get reports from other people or previous former employers or things like that. And sometimes we, again, just get a feel for that when we're speaking with, say, a job candidate or so. But we're also not well trained in how we interview for these soft skills, which makes it even a little bit more critical in terms of coming to the conclusions of whether or not someone bears those soft skills. So if you could estimate, think, what's more important, that I've got someone with performance and skills, with achievements, with accomplishments, or maybe the soft skill of trust? Consider this for even another moment. If we're hiring for performance and skill versus trust, how do we even gauge some of the other softer skills, communication skills or teamwork skills? And how would you rate how you hire for these kinds of skills? But let me also say, once you've hired, in an annual review, how do you evaluate someone's performance or skills, some of their hard skills, versus trust, versus teamwork, versus communication skills? I will say, for the most part, we don't often talk about those softer skills unless there's an issue that we need to deal with. But what's typical? I would say, based on this particular bar graph here, that most people, again, hire for hard skills and performance and achievement, accomplishment. We are usually concerned about their communication skills and teamwork, but it's rare that we hire for or interview for trust in our relationships. And so, for the sake of this discussion today and the presentation, I'm going to have trust represent virtually all of the soft skills, just to keep things simple. And then performance and skill here will represent someone's diploma, someone's, again, the hard skills, the degree, the qualifications that they have for the particular job. And we'll try and compare these as we go through this process today. So usually if someone is a high performer, we call them the superstar, and everybody wants one. In a number of the Harvard Business Review publications recently, they have made reference to how to hire the superstar. And yet, if we're focused only on the superstar or the super performer and we miss out on some of the softer skills, the research is really compelling for us and not very positive or even prognostically encouraging, because hard skills are not everything. In fact, they tend to be, as time goes on, they tend to be something that might even play a lesser role in the overall success of someone's employment, particularly in healthcare. So these superstars, the people that are achievers, they're confident, sometimes they're overconfident, they tend to be highly productive, they're articulate, they've got all the answers, they do tend to be self-centric. They sometimes seek credit and glory. They're in it for themselves. They're interested in more self-advancement over teamwork or team advancement. And so, which ones do you hire for? Again, some of the research would suggest that we hire primarily 90% wise for those hard skills, for performance and achievement, versus trust. And trust is a hard thing, or these soft skills are hard things to hire for and measure in terms of our employment relationships. Again, with the superstar here, and if we have high performance, but we've not assessed for trust, or if we have low trust, the result of that is critical, because a high performer that can't be trusted usually contributes to the culture of mistrust and toxicity. And we don't really consider that much when we think about hiring people, because we want the smartest, the brightest, the quickest, we want all those hard skills in place, but we don't often examine their trustworthiness, or we don't examine their communication skills, or their respectful, or their ability to be respectful. So let's switch this around a little bit. Do we hire solely for trust? If we had a 90% success rate with being or hiring for trustworthiness, but their performance was low, what's the result of that? And it basically ends up being a nice friendship, but lost productivity. And frankly, when I see this in employment environments, particularly in healthcare, is when we hire our friends, or when we hire the physician's kids, or nieces, aunts, uncles, or cousins. And so we trust them because we know them well, but they may not have the high skills and performance and achievement skills that we need to actually do the job. That's not always the case, but it certainly can be the case when we're really looking at how we interview these individuals. So let's look at if we're hiring for somebody with low performance and skill and low trust. Hopefully we never hire someone like that, but what's the result of that? It's not only useless, but dangerous. Because useless, they're not productive, they don't contribute, they're not efficient in their work, and they're dangerous because we can't trust them. We can't trust them with a key, we can't trust them with our reputations or otherwise, and the result of low performance, low trust becomes pretty critical for us. So obviously what we're after is high performance and skill and high trust. But the research will also tell us that's almost impossible to come by. And so what next? So if we can't find someone with perfect skills, perfect performance, perfect achievement, and perfect trust, what's next? So some of the research that's come out through Stanford and Harvard and some of the other healthcare organizations and business entities and research centers point out some very interesting pieces about this for us. And what they're telling us is that it's better for us to hire someone with slightly lesser skill. Let's call it a moderate skill level, a moderate performance level, but for higher trust. And so can we hire somebody that's not quite as skilled as the superstar, but their trustability or their trustworthiness is much greater? What they're saying is that is, first of all, more achievable. People are more coachable and teachable, but the end result is actually better than the opposite. It's better to hire somebody that we trust, where we can work on their skills, their hard skills, and the things that will help them be more efficient. This is an important caveat to make in comparing hard skills with soft skills, because this is one hint that soft skills are the new hard skills, that trust or mutual respect or accountability or those other labeled soft skills are actually more important than how much someone has achieved or physically or intellectually performed in a position before. So the bottom line again is that moderate performance and skill with high trust is better than high performance and low trust. We also know that if we have individuals in our workplaces that can't be trusted, that there is a cost to that. There's a monetary value to that lack of that soft skill. And so again, that's why the soft skill becomes a hard skill. And Harvard Business Review will tell you that it's better to avoid a toxic employee than to hire a superstar, meaning a rabid performer, but a person with low trust. So interviewing for soft skills is actually a hard skill. It's something that is learned. It definitely is learned. And I'd even be curious, maybe in your Q&A, maybe make some notes here, or let me know up front what you, how you would interview for trust. What kinds of questions would you ask? And if you would share those, we can make those available to the other attendees as well. I also want a little writing assignment here for literally 1 minute. I'm going to do a mock job interview with you. And maybe I'm the practice manager and you're coming in to fill the role of maybe an assistant practice manager, or even a receptionist or a secretary. And so I'm going to ask you a question that I'd like you, if you're taking notes today, put your answer actually in writing, either on a piece of paper, or if you'd add it into the Q&A, I'd love to see that too. But here's the question I'll mock this up with you. So thanks for joining us today for the interview. I've had a chance to look over your resume, and really you have a tremendous amount of experience, and with the degree of involvement in previous work like this, it's pretty clear you have some great skills, physical skills to bring to this position. One of the things that we found in our practice is that there's one aspect of the job that's really, really important to us. And I want to ask you the question just like this: how do I know that I can trust you? And then again, we're still in this mock job interview. How do I know that I can trust you? And for those of you listening on the seminar today, would you take just a moment? If you were going to answer that question, how would you answer that question? I'm going to watch the timer here for just a minute. I'll give you just 1 minute to contemplate that. If you'd put your answers in the Q&A, that would be great. How would you answer that question? How do I know that I can trust you? How would I trust you with the keys to my practice? How would I trust you with my reputation? How would I trust you with the reputation of our practice and what we need to do? How do I know that I could trust you in my absence? Take just another minute. Got about 40 seconds left. Thank you. And those of you who are still contemplating that, please feel free to keep adding that to the Q&A. I'm glancing through those now. One of the attendees said, this is really hard to put into words. Absolutely, it is. And yet I would challenge you to find a way to communicate to someone why they should trust you, how they could trust you. Some of the examples that you've been given are really great as well. Some of you are recommending that they contact your references, asking 5 people who know me really well. Matt said, I like to ask my folks to define boundaries for me and then give an example of when someone has crossed a boundary that they've set and how they've handled that. And boy, we could have a whole nother discussion about boundaries, at least another hour seminar on professional relationships and boundaries. If you're interviewing someone for trust, this is a question that can be delved into, and you'll find that virtually every single person you ask that question to will be somewhat puzzled, will be hesitant, will be frustrated. I don't know how to respond to that. I don't know how to I don't know how to put that in words. And so keep in mind, this is something that if you want to know about trustworthiness, this is a question worth exploring. Kenzie said, integrity is a personal core value that's deeply rooted in my personality. I take it very seriously. And I'd follow up with you, Kenzie, and I would say, can you give me some examples of where integrity did play a role or when it was compromised? And I'd explore some more. I probably wouldn't just take a simple answer as the answer that I'm looking for. If I'm looking for core issues on trustworthiness. So how do I know that I can trust you? I often tell my friends, not friends, but maybe acquaintances or otherwise, I know when I can trust you when I'm willing to give you my garage code and my truck key, a copy of my truck key. And it's kind of a funny little analogy, but really it is kind of that way. If I could give you my garage code, that means that you'd have access to anything physical that was of value to me. But frankly, you'd also have value. You'd have access to my family, my children. Could I trust you with that? That's one of my kind of silly measures for trust, whether or not I'd be willing to share those things. We talk about trust in job interviews, and we should talk about that even more. Bullies in the Workplace is an article that was written by HR Magazine in 2015, and they identified healthcare and education as the two most toxic workplace industries in the US. That's a sad commentary for us, and we have a lot to do in order. Both of those professions are helping professions. They're human professions. They're influential. They're teaching. They're healing. They're doing all these things. And yet, according to the research, they're also the most toxic environments, which doesn't speak well for us. It says that we're actually doing things that we don't practice ourselves. And so with that, it's a little bit of a throwing the gauntlet down, or a little bit of a challenge for us to think about what we do and what we're accountable for. I saw this photograph recently, and I've tried to find a source for it, and I apologize to not have a reference or someone to credit with this, but it was very compelling to me in terms of how it represents how we engage with one another humanistically sometimes. If you pull back from your screen a little bit, squint your eyes a bit, and maybe go blurry and look at this picture, you'll see that the red is in the shape of a heart. And again, that is symbolic in and of itself in terms of what it tells us and where we should be and where we need to be in terms of our communications. Literally, lives depend on it. And here's why. Harvard Business, in a monumental study in 2015 called Toxic Workers, said that toxic workplaces are the 5th leading cause of death. The cause of death from toxicity in the workplace really would be monumentally greater than what we're even seeing with coronavirus these days. But this is not something that we're talking about. And it is a very compelling statistic to know the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the mental impacts of toxicity in the workplace. And so interviewing for trust is so critical for us. Gossip, we would say, is ubiquitous. It's everywhere, and none of us can really escape it. But if you've had kids like we've had kids, you know what it's like to have spilled milk in the car, and especially if you live in a hot environment, and it will take months and months of repeated cleaning and everything to get that sour spilled milk smell out of the car. And so it's very analogous to the impact of gossip in the workplace and the negative impact that we experience in every aspect of what we do. Some people have defined gossip, and essentially we know what it is. It's kind of informal talk, and it's usually around a couple of individuals, and it's usually about someone who is not present. But these individuals, researchers, have identified positive gossip, neutral gossip, and negative gossip. The one we focus on the most probably is the negative gossip, but positive gossip we would encourage all the time. Neutral gossip, probably not necessary, but I'd call it filler speech and filler conversation. But the negative gossip is truly something that we should take a look at the impact of that. again, by another HBR article. I love the title of this, Stop Complaining About Your Colleagues Behind Their Backs. Gossip, even by any other name, is totally destructive. It's a strategy that impacts not only the individuals that are being spoken about, but the entire organization. In the years that I've been in healthcare, I have seen individual careers be destroyed by gossip. I've seen people leave their careers over things that were not true, but stated in their behalf. I've seen businesses close down because of gossip related to negative aspects of what people had experienced. The impact of this, not only mentally, but financially, is just incredibly powerful. The effects of gossip and of the impact of loss of trust, you can see some of these impacts. But as we look at loss of trust, again, loss of these soft skills, what we've found in researching who sues us and the demographics of those who sue healthcare providers, it's really rarely about medical mistake. What it comes down to is the loss of trust. People sue when their trust is broken. And the examples that are prevalent, and you as well, you would know a number of healthcare providers that are extremely astute and very bright, very capable, that may get sued more frequently because they lack the ability to develop a relationship of trust with their patients. And the converse is also true. We know of very what should we say, incapable physicians or providers that never have lawsuits brought against them simply because they have the ability to develop a relationship of trust with their patients. So the impact on us is enormous depending on how it happens. We see a lot of excuses for gossip. Yeah, can I blow off some steam with you? Let me close the door and tell you something. And do you mind if I vent for a minute? Or what do you think about John's performance lately? Whatever that is. And there are dozens of other excuses, but they really are excuses for gossip and negativity. Where it happens, where it happens. Sometimes it's one-on-one. It happens in a private office, the break room, the phone calls, the texts, even social media. It happens really everywhere. There's not an isolated way. UC Riverside did some research recently that I thought was pretty compelling, just on gossip and toxicity in general, but they studied nearly 500 people. A few more women than men participated in several studies. These participants were adults, and they all wore a portable listening device, an EAR, electronically activated recorder. And then about 10% of their conversation was randomly recorded and then analyzed by research assistants. Their goal was to find out how much of their day was spent gossiping, whether positive, neutral, or negative gossip. And interestingly, may be surprising to you, that women and men engage equally in negative gossip. Younger people engage more in negative gossip than older adults, and about 14% of participants' conversation were gossip. Or in 16 hours of being awake, about an hour of our day is spent gossiping, positive, negative, or neutral. And so 3/4 of the gossip was neutral. That's a good thing. Negative gossip was twice as prevalent as positive gossip, but gossip overwhelmingly wasn't about celebrities, or it was about an acquaintance. It was about somebody at work or some friend or associate as well. And then interestingly to me, maybe not surprising though, but extroverts usually gossip more frequently than introverts across all three categories. So the only time women gossip more than men is in the neutral category. So that tends to lead us to believe that there's just a lot more chatter, and some of that is gossip and most of that is neutral. So there was no correlation between less educated people gossiping more than the wealthier or the better educated people. So there were some assertions otherwise, but this research really took a different take on that. When I look at gossip, I don't know why this picture of fire seems to be very symbolic to me in a lot of ways in terms of its impact. I also see the ignition of gossip and how it happens. And recently I kind of compiled what I think are the gossiper types, and there are 6 of them. The first one is the anti-gossiper, then the tolerator, then there's the arsonist and the refueler and the whole kit and caboodle, and then we have the blatantly ignorant. And I want to describe some of those for you because you'll either maybe fit into one of these categories or certainly know of others who do. The anti-gossiper is actually our good guy. He sees the arsonist. He actively resists and reports what's going on. At the earliest opportunity, he intervenes with constructive measures whenever it can happen, and then tries to build a culture of trust. And that culture of trust will be built upon at least neutral gossip or positive gossip. Then we have what we call the tolerator, and you know these people. They see the fire. They feel no responsibility whatsoever. They look away. They're not interested in getting involved. It's not my problem. And in my years of studying the German language, there's one of the words that I can't really translate well is the word egal. And it essentially means, I don't really care. Don't bother me. Just leave me alone. I don't care about that gossip over there, or that big fire over there. It's just a sense of being very exclusive in your thoughts, not caring about what's around you. Then we have the arsonist. The arsonist's role in gossip is to just light the fire. All they do is light it, but they usually stick around to see what happens. As most arsonists do, they'll stay to see what happens with the fire they started. Sometimes they're in the shadows. And interestingly, even among arsonist gossipers, they often will come back and say, hey, what can I do to help? And sometimes with a true arsonist, they're the ones who call 911 to report the fire. We have also the opportunist or the refueler. Although they didn't start the gossip and wouldn't start the gossip, they kind of like it and they enjoy it, and they won't decline any chances to perpetuate it. So when the opportunity arises, they're usually adding fuel to the fire and substantiating the falsehoods that have been perpetuated as well. And then finally, in the gossiper type, the whole kit and caboodle. Really, these are individuals who start the fire, they fuel the gossip, they see it through to its finish, they celebrate when it's over, and they're already planning the next fire. And so those, for the most part, are the gossipers. The last one is a curious one to me. And as I was sharing these gossiper types with someone, kind of an unsuspecting individual, he asked me, he said, well, what if I'm just unaware that there's anything going on at all? And I thought, oh, so you're the one that stands next to the fire and says, what fire? It's kind of the epitome of unself-awareness. And so I looked at him and I said, well, if I knew that was you, I wouldn't hire you, because I really need someone who is proactively not only aware of negativity, but fighting against it, proactively building teams and strengthening relationships and eradicating workplace toxicity. That's who I need. So to be blatantly ignorant is certainly not a good thing. So what does gossip say about the person gossiping? You can imagine what it says, and you could have probably written these as well, that usually the individual who gets caught up in gossip is trying to cover for their own insecurities or inadequacies. They're trying to rally a tribe. They're self-centric. Their communication skills are not good. And then they're afraid to give direct feedback or to engage in a meaningful conversation with someone about whom they're gossiping. I love this quote from Deborah Regal, and essentially she's saying, by gossiping, you're really giving up an opportunity. You're giving up an opportunity to have a very meaningful, open, honest relationship in a culture that could be improved because of your skill and your ability to participate and listen. I think it's a very astute way of stating really what we're missing out on if we don't exhibit these soft skills. So, what's the cost of this? We know that nothing destroys a culture faster than a feeling of mistrust. And when you think about your own environments, I think it's critical for you to consider um, if you could rate the culture that you're currently in terms of a fully trusted environment to a zero trust environment, where would you rate that? And I obviously hope you'd be on that upper end of things. I'd love to see you in the 8, 9, 10 range. But if you're anything less than that, then you have individuals coming to work every day in a culture of fear. Maybe it's you that's coming to work in a culture of fear. You're coming together in a culture of intimidation, in a culture of lack of accountability, a culture of poor communication. And so the ability for us as a team to rally in a culture of mistrust is desperately needing improvement. So what we also know is that leaders, and if you're one of those leaders, if you wait to contain the toxic damage or the mistrust in your workplace, you really risk losing everything. And the comparison between these cultures of trust and cultures of mistrust are amazing in terms of productivity as well. Some of the research in this Harvard Business article called Toxic Workers, you can access that online. You can locate it. It's a very excellent white paper that's out there. Quite a bit of statistical analyses within that paper. But what they will tell you is that productivity, or our ability in a practice or in a workplace environment, our ability to do our job can be reduced up to 50% in some cases in a culture of mistrust. And so if you're a practice manager, if you're someone that leads a group of individuals, whether in healthcare or not, if I came to you and I said, you've got a culture here that we need to work with, would you be willing to work with that if I could improve your productivity by 50%? Well, no one in their right mind would turn that opportunity away. There's no way. But I would say even most leaders would be willing to engage in a conversation or trainings or those kinds of things that would eradicate toxicity and actually improve productivity by even 10%. And so if we're looking at the cost of this type of environment, again, back to these soft skills, when we look at the cost of the lack of soft skills, then we're kind of looking at our bottom line. And I often ask people if they have a line item for that. Do you have a line item because it's costing you money? So you better budget that in for next year. But this bottom line is deeply impacted by, again, the lack of these soft skills. Lots of teams get caught up in the menagerie of hiring really sharp, intelligent, bright, productive, focused individuals without ever once inquiring about or exploring the idea of trustworthiness, communication skills, mutual respect, accountability, some of those, again, those critical soft skills that are turning into the new hard skills. So if we fail to work with this in our practices, humorously, we should probably build a budget line item for what it's costing us. And the cost of mistrust is huge. So Harvard did another business study looking at a survey from 60,000 employees. And of those 60,000, 12% of them left their jobs due to uncivil treatment. Nearly 40% intentionally reduced their work quality because they were in a toxic environment. Those employees that were in this environment, they loosened their bonds with their work life. So they weren't as connected as they need to be or as they would want to be. And around half of them decreased their work effort, and they purposefully reduced their work time. And a quarter of them admitted to taking their frustrations out on customers. So this was not a healthcare survey, but think about it. If healthcare is even more toxic work environment, then more than a quarter of our people are taking these frustrations out on patients. These are sobering statistics, and they're very sobering for me, having been in management and executive management in healthcare and in associated healthcare environments. These sort of take my breath away because I can look back historically and see where these have played out in our practice. 80% of individuals, again, in this survey, they lost work time just worrying about somebody's rudeness. And it's that worry that contributes deeply to workplace toxicity being the fifth leading cause of death in the US. We know what worry does, what it does physiologically to our bodies. It raises blood pressure. It raises our coping ability. It puts us in a sweat mode where we're constantly looking over our backs, and that becomes just exhausting over time. So nearly 80% who were involved in toxic environments were less committed to their workplace environments. More than half said their workplace performance decreased, and a number of people lost time at work because they were constantly avoiding the toxic individuals. I would imagine as we talk about these statistics that you've even kind of templated, if you will, how these play out in your own environments, whether you're in healthcare or not. For those of you who are in healthcare, this is certainly something that I think virtually every one of you could relate to some degree. As we come back to this, I'd like you to consider how you hire. Historically, again, we typically hire for performance and skill. Probably the thing that we hire for the least, that we just make assumptions about, is trust. We assume, we might get eye contact and think, yeah, I can trust them. But our ability to assess their trustworthiness, again, it's a discussion for a whole nother seminar in assessing or interviewing for trust. I'd recommend a couple of articles. There are several articles published by Inc. Magazine, Stanford Business, Harvard Business Review. Also, there are a couple of books published by the Covey group in Salt Lake City that they have monumental, excellent resources on trust. And I'd recommend those to you. I think they're very, very helpful. The take home here is that never should we sacrifice trust and performance in order to get better. Sorry, let me make sure I say that right. Never should we sacrifice trust for performance. In other words, we shouldn't just find a ragingly qualified individual that will have low trustworthiness and hire them simply because their hard skills are good. It really is best for us to hire someone with moderate skills, moderate hard skills, but with a higher degree of trust. And even Simon Sinek, if those of you who know Simon Sinek as a leadership guru, will say the same thing. He gave a great TED talk on trust, and he said essentially, if we're not hiring for trust and hiring for hard skills only, we really are perpetuating the idea that we're going to have a workplace culture of mistrust and toxicity. So these are very compelling statistics that I'm hoping will be some have some meaning to you. Part of the services that I offer are practice consultation. I do a lot of staff trainings in healthcare organizations, leadership coaching, seminar service, and I'm just more than happy to offer a complimentary 30-minute initial consultation. But I want to open up for some comments or questions. But before that, I'll share with you an experience that I had earlier this year. Prior to COVID, I was invited to come to an academic institution, a university, and consult with a particular school of healthcare providers. And these are PhD level people that are highly intelligent, very bright, very productive, but they had gotten to the point where they were so at odds with one another that they were even considering firing them all and starting that whole school over again. And it was just kind of the last straw. They thought, let's see what happens. Before we do anything drastic, let's see if we can get some training. I came in and spent an entire week with those individuals. We canceled everything for an entire week. And so all of the faculty was required to attend this training, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. It was brutal, it was intense, and probably one of the most compelling experiences I've ever had professionally. At the end of that week, I knew kind of walking in that there were certain toxic individuals in that group of about 20 professionals. I knew that there were at least 3 that were the instigators or the arsonists or the whole kit and caboodleists, if you will. By the end of that week, I had messages coming to me from those even toxic individuals. And those toxic individuals one of them wrote a note and said, I had no idea I was one of them. And I see myself very differently now. And I had 2 others come to me as well and say, this was compelling. I need to change how I'm looking at myself and how I'm looking at others. What we see with a lot of toxic workplace kinds of things are ideas that many people are unaware that they're the instigator or that they're the arsonist. When you point it out to them, and very directly point it out to them, many of them can see it. And for the most part, they're willing to make some changes. Some are not, however, and we need to find other ways to either help counsel, mitigate, or coach out to make sure that we preserve the integrity of our organization and the integrity of the group that we've got together. That concludes generally part of this discussion. I on purpose wanted to leave some time. We've got roughly about 10 minutes. I wanted to let me look at Q&A to see if we have anything new there. And then Sarah, at your will, if you want to maybe open the mics or unmute people so that they can contribute to this. While you're considering that, let me look at our comments here from one of our attendees. I do fear my culture. Can I just commiserate with you? One of the hardest things is to fear the culture that we leave our homes from and walk into in a work environment every day. And now that many of you are working from home, you still fear the culture because it continues. And we have a lack of some of our, we can hardly see our coworkers anymore, and the likelihood of this mistrusted culture is even greater. Continuing on, I try to be open and honest. I feel like I sometimes get knocked down, so then I don't feel valued and feel like I shouldn't speak at all. That is such a typical response for a culture of mistrust. There is a request to share the links for the articles, and I'm happy to put those together, get them back to Sarah, and she can distribute those as well. Chris, thank you so much. This was very informative and helpful, great message. We'd love to hear more about how organizations can more thoroughly learn about assessing trust. And reach out to me. Here on your screen, there is my cell phone. You can text me. I'm pretty open about that. There's not a problem there. Text me or email me at that address. We can chat more. And if we do nothing more than chat and give you some resources, I'm totally fine to do that. So
While we're waiting, I actually am seeing a theme in some of the questions where people are wondering if there's a constructive way for them to work with their coworkers to come up with strategies to deal with some of these arsonists, these individuals who are negative, because they're worried that that consultation with each other is itself negative gossip. So how would you address that, Michael?
Well, and I'm actually looking at one of those. Let me. Sarah had a question, and Sarah's an excellent clinician out of Benioff Children's Hospital in Oakland, California, that I've known for years and have a great amount of respect for. She said, if you work in an environment with a wonderful group of people, but there's an extreme disconnect with administration, would you recommend a way to build that bridge or or bring up the subject or concerns in a respectful way? Knowing some of the history at Benioff in the San Francisco Bay Area, particularly in Oakland, that those are some unique circumstances. That particular hospital was recently acquired by the UCSF system, and there has been a disconnect, and it's definitely a bigger disconnect than we might otherwise assume. There's a great need and an effort to continue to reach out in a trusting way to those administrators and exhibit that. There's probably not a prescribed method to do that, but I'd be happy, Sarah, to talk through that and kind of help build some sort of a strategic plan to improve that and make that better. Ultimately, it takes two sides. It takes both sides to want to be willing to contribute in both directions. And if we can coach that, all the better. If one side is still resistant, there may not be hope for that, but we'd absolutely shoot for that as much as we could. Here's another comment. How do we deal with the toxicity around us from our bosses or other colleagues if we cannot vent since it's considered negative gossip? That's a great question. And I'd love to sort of picture an environment where we had no negative gossip. And yet I've been there as well, where there have been things happen to us that I sort of have to get it out. I have to talk about it. And I think one of the things, if you must vent to someone, at the end of that venting, there has to be a constructive strategy to move that forward. If we're venting just for the sake of venting, I think it's very destructive. If we're venting so that we can put a strategy in place to change the trajectory of what just happened to us so that it's done in a productive way, I think we're in a better place. So again, venting for venting is really useless and very destructive. Venting with a plan has the potential for resolution. If there are other questions, other comments, Michelle, thank you. As an HR manager, the importance of soft skills helps me perform my duties more effectively. I appreciate the awareness of this today. Thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback. This really is just the beginning. To have a conversation like this for about 50 minutes just opens a crack in the door for further discussions and things that can happen. If you're looking for those strategies or methods or trainings or a way for us to train in terms of interviewing for those soft skills, I'm happy to communicate with you more, provide whatever resources I can, and usually most of that I can do it gratis. If we do full consultations, that's another discussion too, but thank you for that. Here's another comment. How do you discuss with your doctor the situation of having a toxic coworker? When we've tried in the past, the physician acts as if the coworker walks on water and is untouchable. However, the coworker is making a majority of the large staff miserable. I can tell you, I had the exact same circumstance as a young manager years ago. We had an individual, a clinician that was essentially one of the brightest people I knew. He was highly recommended, highly respected by a number of people and colleagues, some kind of outside colleagues. Patients loved him, and yet his immediate team could not work with him, couldn't be in the same room with him, would not work on projects with him. In fact, his approach was so toxic that it began to destroy our team. As a manager, I went to human resources and said, we have to fix this. And human resources looked at me and said, nope, he's your highest producer. He produces and brings in more revenue than any of your other clinicians. You can't do anything about it. I was distressed about that. And I went back and thought for days about this. Why is this not? And I started to draw some circles. And I ended up drawing some circles that defined, we had productivity, we had skills, we had patient relationships, we had collegial relationships. And I took this back to HR and I said, look, he is excellent at this and excellent at this, and patients love him, but his coworkers hate him. And the impact of this one right here is destroying our entire team. I need to do something. And at that point in time, it caught wind. And they actually allowed me to initiate a performance improvement plan. For the person who expressed that here, there's not the name says anonymous attendee. If you want to get in touch with me, I'll give you what I ended up publishing on that particular item, and I think was very, very helpful in resolving that particular issue. So thank you for bringing that up. Kinsey said, as a leader, how do you stop gossip? One of the ways is to stop it before it ever walks in the door. And that is when you hire someone, you address it specifically. Then you say, you ask them, what kind of a gossiper are you? And it will take them aback. They'll think, well, I'm not a gossiper. And can you give me some examples of when gossip in the workplace has been, good or bad? And we talk proactively about gossip at the hiring stage. And so if you have in your practice a code of conduct, that code of conduct will be something that you can hang on to. If you don't have that, you should write a code of conduct, and that everyone is held accountable for that code of conduct. It specifically addresses gossip, workplace destructive environments, and then we talk it, we teach it, we hold them accountable in annual reviews, etc. So it's that's again part of that discussion. And Kinsey, if you'd like to reach out to me on that one, I'm happy to let you know.
And actually, at that, just for a second, if I can break in, we are at time. So what I'd like to do is give away that gift card to one of the people who are still connected into the meeting, and then anyone who's available to stick around afterwards, we'll just hang on as long as Michael's schedule allows. So I'm using a random number generator and looking through the list of attendees to see whose name matches up with the randomly selected number. And it looks like our winner today is Rachel. So Rachel, we have your email from your registration. We'll be reaching out to get you an e-gift card. So I'll go ahead and step back again and let Michael continue to answer questions.
Awesome. So you're all welcome to drop off if you're finished. For those of you who want to continue the discussion, I'm happy to have that. Again, from someone else here, how do you respond to employees who are always correcting you and answering questions you may have even if you are not directing the question to them? It's hard to feel like I can ask questions without being judged. I'd love to visit with you offline about that. That is definitely something I've seen, and that comes down to the intention of our coworkers. What is their intention? And many of them will say that my intention is to make the workplace better, or to make this procedure better, but they're doing it at the cost of you. And they're doing it at the cost of your reputation. They're doing it at the cost of your personal feelings and otherwise. That probably would qualify as one of those people that are probably, maybe, highly intelligent, very bright, want the control, and they may even be trying to undermine you in order to make their wishes known. I could share a number of experiences that way that I know of, and how they resolve. But again, I'm happy to talk to you offline about that. Other questions that we have, you can put them in the Q&A. It looks like we're not able to unmute people, but we can definitely. Great question. Is there any resource to see how to trust people? I'll give you a couple of resources. If you Google the Covey Group, Covey, Covey Leadership has a number of resources on trust. I think it's really some very, very applicable resources for you. There's also an excellent TED Talk that is available by an individual from Harvard Business School. Her name is Frances Frei, Frei, and she talks about how to build or rebuild trust. And she has a great presentation. As you know, TED Talks are, less than 20 minutes. They're probably on the order of 15 to 18 minutes. She gets into trust being a three-legged stool. And it's, if I can remember them, it's empathy, the rigor of trust, the rigor of logic. And there's a third one and I can't remember, I apologize. But her point is that in order to trust people, you have to have all three of those. So Google TED Talk, Frances Frei, trust, and you'll come up with a great talk that way. HBR, Harvard Business Review, Stanford Business, Inc. magazine as well. If you Google how to trust people, you'll come up with some excellent resources from them as well. So I'm hoping that's helpful to you, Hamoon. Other questions? Angela, what do we do when someone performs exceptionally in an interview, but after we hire them, they turn out to be toxic? Yes, yes, yes. They had all the right answers and appeared to have soft skills, but it turns out they were not presenting themselves truthfully and had manipulated myself and others. There's a gentleman by the name of Adam Grant, and I follow him on social media, and you might follow him as well. He came up with what he felt like was an excellent question, one excellent question that would help root out these very people that you're talking about. And here was his question. He said, ask it in a job interview. And he said, our research tells us that we have the ability to root these people out with this question. And I've been intrigued by it. I've used it a number of times, and I know of others who have used it, and the findings are very interesting. Here's the question you ask this candidate. When you're in the job interview, just say, I need you to give me 3 to 5 examples of people whose careers you have helped advance. But the question itself is innocuous, but they have to give you 3 to 5 examples. It's their answers that are critical. And it's not even their answers as much as who they describe. And Adam Grant says that for a person who has a tendency to be more toxic, they will give you examples of people whose careers they helped advance that were above them in the food chain, if you will. If they give you examples of people whose careers they have helped advance below them in their hierarchical employment structure, they are less likely to be toxic. Now, I've had a number of people try that out, and it does flesh out a little bit. So I would encourage you in the future. Now, the fact that you've hired them comes back to what do we do now? And again, if you have the ability to create a code of conduct that is required of all employees, if you haven't, please create it and get some ideas online as to what that would look like. But it must specifically evaluate and look at workplace behavior. Then you hold them to that. You hold it to them during the interview process. You hold it to them during the hiring process. If they sign a contract, they are subject to that code of conduct. In their annual reviews or quarterly reviews or whatever you have, they are judged partially based upon that code of conduct. So you maintain ultimate consistency in delivering the messages of that code of conduct that are helpful. Ultimately, there's not 100% chance of us eradicating the toxic workers, but but to your point, Angela, I think that I'm always wary of those who have all the answers. those who seem to just have all the right Sunday school answers in a job interview. And so when you find someone that has all of those right answers, I'd be a little cautious, because you should be able to ask questions that they need to be thoughtful about. And I can help you with that. You should be able to ask questions that will get them to thinking and get them out of their canned answers. We don't want people that give canned answers. So we shouldn't ask canned questions either. So, Angela, I hope that helps. And if you'd like, please reach out to me. Any other questions? Cindy, Sydney, I apologize, Sydney. Do you ever give any training or know of any good training on growing or develop better soft skills? Absolutely. In fact, one of the trainings that I love to do is workplace values. And we go through a series of activities where we discover our top 5 personal values. Well, when we discover those, we realize that that's what's driving our workplace behavior. However, whatever those behaviors are, those top 5 values are what drive that for us individually. I mentioned to you about this university that I had consulted with earlier in the year. And one of the first days that we were together, we discovered what each other's top 5 values were. It's a process that we go through, and it's compelling to do it. But we find out what those are. And every attendee got to put their 5 values on the wall around the room. And where there was crossover, for instance, if I had one of my values was integrity and one of yours was too, then I'd put mine below yours. And what we ended up finding out is that as we lined up all these values on the wall, we found some common ground. And then we also found where there was no common ground. I had done something in a training purposefully to make one of the attendees a little uncomfortable. And I did this by putting rocks in a backpack and had this gentleman sit down at his seat with these big heavy rocks in his backpack. And then we just continued on with the seminar. After about an hour, one woman at the back raised her hand almost in anger and said, "You have forgotten about him with his backpack. And I'm concerned that he's sitting over there and he's not able to, respond because he's in pain." Well, I knew, and I pointed out to her that one of her values, unlike anyone else in the room, one of her top values was grace. And I went over to the wall and pointed that out, and I called her by name and I said, "You just manifested your value of grace." And then we went through this process of inviting him back and having those rocks taken out and things. But I loved that. And in answer to your question, Sydney, that is the kind of training that we do. And I think it helps not only develop soft skills, but acknowledge each other's personal values that are different from ours. Looks like we're about wrapped up. Matt, thank you for your comment to say thank you. It's been great for me as well. I always love more interaction, and I appreciate that interaction through your chat as well. So with that, let's bid farewell. Please keep in touch with me if you'd like, and I'd be more than happy to work with you anytime. Thanks so much, everyone.
And thank you, Michael. Everybody, thanks again for joining us. We hope that you'll be able to join us at future webinars. Don't forget, the next one is May 19th at 12:30 p.m. with Josie Moosman talking about the role of RNs in primary care. So thank you again for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care.